inhibitor, the stuff that prevents corrosion and limescale from building up in your heating system. And sometimes if you've done a bit of work on the heating system, you might need to add some of this stuff back in. A lot of people think it's really complex and that you need a special pump to do that, but I'm going to let you in on a little secret today. You don't need any special tools or any pumps to add this stuff to your heating system yourself really quickly and really easily. First thing you want to do, cover up the floor with a towel, because inevitably you might get drips of dirty water or inhibitor coming out of the radiator, and you don't want that to go on the carpet. Once the floor's protected, we can go on to isolating this radiator, because we've got two pipes coming into the radiator, flow and return, and we need to isolate this radiator from the rest of the heating system. So the first valve to take a look at is the TRV. That's this one here, a thermostatic radiator valve. We'll close that all the way up to 0, and then if I scoot all the way up the other end of the radiator, you'll see this, which is a lock shield valve. We'll just take the little cap off and you can see the lock shield valve, and we need to turn this pin clockwise to close the valve off. Now remember to count the turns when you close this, because when we open it back up again, we need to open it up by the same amount of turns, because that way we won't lose the balancing of the heating system, which is really, really important. So grab an adjustable spanner. You want to turn that valve clockwise, so that's all the way closed now, and that was 3.5 turns. Remember that, because it will be important later when we open that valve back up again. So this radiator is isolated from the system now, and no water or pressure can come into this radiator past the valves. So what we're going to do now is relieve the pressure on this radiator. On one end of your radiator you'll have a radiator bleed valve. They often look a little bit like this. So grab the radiator bleed key, place that onto the little square at the end of the valve there, and when we undo that we're going to see a little stream of water come out of that hole in the valve, and you'll want a rag or a bit of tissue paper to catch that water. So remember, lefty loosey, that one was a little bit tight. Undo that valve and you can see the stream of water just coming out of there. Now that's going to slow down, as you can see. Just close that valve back off. Now if that stream of water doesn't slow down and it keeps coming out after a while, that would unfortunately mean that one of the valves is allowing water past into the radiator, and you wouldn't be able to continue without fixing that problem first. But that's reasonably unusual, and you should find that after doing this there's no more pressure in this radiator. But we need enough space in the radiator to get this 1 litre bottle of inhibitor into the rad. Now to do that we need to drop the water level down inside the radiator. Now to do that, come to one end of the radiator and find this big nut here that attaches the valve to the radiator. You're looking for the big nut that's on the radiator side of the valve and not the nut that's on the system side of the valve. So don't undo the one that attaches to the pipe. We're going to undo that nut to release some of the water in the radiator. So there's two tools that you're going to need for this next step. One of those is one of these. One of those is one of these, a plum tub. Because the skirting board's so close to the pipe, it's hard to demonstrate, but normally these clip around the pipe and it allows the pipe to get really tight to the skirting board underneath the valve, so that when you undo the valve, all the water goes into the plum tub. Now the great thing about the plum tub is it holds 1.4 litres of water. So if we fill it near the top, we'll definitely release enough water to make way for our 1 litre bottle of inhibitor. I'll drop a link for a plum tub, but if you don't have one of these, you can just use a little mini roller tray or a dish from the kitchen. But a little tip from me, if you use the best dish in the kitchen, you're likely to get in trouble. Don't ask me how I know. So use one of these or one of these, and then we're going to release the water from the radiator. Support the valve with your hand or some grips so that you don't put unnecessary pressure on the pipe, and then using your adjustable spanner, we'll just crack off that valve, wind the nut back. Now you'll notice the water's flowing very, very slowly. Now the reason that water's flowing really slowly is because it's pulling a vacuum. So what we need to do is undo the bleed valve again, and if I move my microphone you'll probably hear it hiss as it sucks in air as the water dissipates into the container. So if I undo this, there you go, you can hear that hissing, and if we look here, the water is now flowing a lot faster into the container. And you can do up or undo the bleed valve at the top to control the rate at which that water flows into your container. So let that water drain out. This is a bit of a boring bit. Sit back and watch until you've got enough space for your 1 litre of inhibitor to go into the radiator. Like I say, that's really easy with the Plum Tub because I know that it holds 1.4 litres. So when it's nearly full, I'll know I've got enough space for this. So I can do that nut up now to stop the flow of water. I can tighten that nut all the way back up because I don't need to undo it anymore. There we go. So the nut on my valve is done back up. No water can escape from the bottom now, but you do want to leave the bleed valve open for now. I'll show you why when we start filling up this radiator. What we're now going to do is make a little tool to get this stuff into the radiator. It's really, really simple, but it's where things get a bit interesting. Now, if you're not a subscriber, make sure you hit subscribe for me because you don't want to miss out on future videos, and hit like because that helps this video reach and help more people just like you on YouTube. And the last little thing I ask from you is to check out the DIY club for me in the description below because that helps me massively as well. So let's make this little tool, shall we? So to get this bottle of inhibitor in this radiator, we need a way to transfer it in there. And for the last 5 years, I've had one of these knocking around in my plumbing bag. Now I'm going to show you how to make one in about 5 minutes. But I can't take full credit for this. About 5 years ago, I saw a video by a man called James at Plumber Parts who invented this, and I made one for myself, and today I'll spread the word and show you guys how to make one. So what we're going to do, first of all, take the cap from your inhibitor. The inhibitor won't come out because it's got a little safety cap on there, and then we're going to turn this cap into this tool. So grab your cap and a drill with a stepped drill bit, and I'll drill a 20mm hole right in the middle of the cap. There we go, so we have a cap with a 20mm hole drilled in the centre. Now you want one of these. This is a 1/2 inch to 15mm compression coupler. And now grab a rubber washer or an O-ring. It doesn't really matter what it is. In fact, these are 1/2 inch shower head washers. I'll stretch that over the end of the coupler. It doesn't fit perfectly. If you've got something better, great, but this is what I've got in the bag. It'll do the job. We'll then push that into the cap, just like that. Then I'll grab the nut off the coupler and just put that on the end of the coupler, just like that. And using my grips and adjustable spanner, I'll just do the nut up. This is a flexible tap connector. You can see it's got a rubber washer in the end already. Now we just need to thread the cap that we've made onto that tap connector, and that is one end complete. That end will go onto the bottle. You can see on the other end I've got some old PTFE tape on there already, but for the purpose of the video, grab a reel of PTFE tape, really cheap stuff, and just wind a few turns of that onto the threads. So whack some of that on there, and you're pretty much now good to go. We've got a tool here that we can transfer this inhibitor into the radiator with. Now make sure you leave your bleed valve open, because otherwise, as we transfer the inhibitor into the radiator, the air won't be able to escape. So scooting down to the other end of the radiator, what we're looking for is this bung in the top here. Using an adjustable spanner, we'll undo this blanking cap. They're not normally very tight, they're just on a rubber O-ring. So we can take the cap all the way out. And now that bung's out, we'll grab the little tool that we made earlier, and we're going to thread that into the end of the radiator. And there you go. It doesn't need to be hugely tight. And you'll see here I've got the isolation valve on the tap connector turned off. Now very carefully, so I don't spill it, I'll just attach my bottle of inhibitor. I'll now turn the isolation valve on the tap connector to open. And if I tip my bottle up, I'll start to empty the contents of my inhibitor into the radiator, and you can hear the air dissipating the other end as the contents of the bottle empties in to the radiator. If you give it a little squeeze, it'll speed things up a bit, and there we go, it's empty. With some help from our good old friend gravity, that has ended up in there. So I'll grab my screwdriver again, turn off the isolation valve, and now I can just undo the tool. We shouldn't have much come out of this at all. Just a small drop. There you go. You've got a small drop of inhibitor just come out of there. Have a little wipe up with a cloth. So we can now grab the bung that we took out of the end. If the O-ring's good on it, just replace it and do it up. You don't need to do these overly tight because they have a rubber O-ring on them. and if the O-ring's good, they should seal pretty easily. And I'll just close my bleed valve up again for now, and we can now think about refilling the radiator with water. So the first thing I'm going to do is open up my TRV, and now we'll do the same with the lock shield. You should hopefully remember the amount of turns that it took to do this up. If you can't remember, then you might need to rebalance the heating system. Click on this video where I did a comprehensive guide on exactly how to do that. So I'll open this lock shield up now by the same amount of turns that I did it up. And now full system pressure can come back through the valves into the radiator, but we've got some air in there. So we need to bleed this radiator now. That's good. There's no air in the radiator. And now the radiator's full, we can just go around and do a little leak check to make sure everything that you undone isn't leaking. Now it's all good. We know we've got a radiator full of inhibitor and water. Now, if you've got an open vented system with an F&E tank or tanks in the loft, then you don't need to do anything. If you've got a pressurized system, we're going to head to the boiler and top up the pressure. To increase the pressure, simply pull down on the filling loop and you'll hear a hissing sound as water runs into the system. Normally we're going to top that up to between 1 and 1.5 bar. And the final step to all this is to turn your heating system on for 15 to 30 minutes to allow that inhibitor to circulate from just this radiator to the rest of the heating system. And on most of these bottles, you'll get a little sticker like this one, and you can stick that on the edge of the boiler so that you know when you last put inhibitor in the system. So in my opinion, this is a far easier and more effective method of putting inhibitor in your heating system or topping it up. So you should make one of these to keep in your plumbing bag. I hope the video's helped you and you've enjoyed it. If you have, hit one of these videos because there's so much more to learn, and I'll see you guys in the next one.